The other snipers shook their heads in disbelief. 2 weeks alone in that forest will drive anyone insane, they muttered. But Elena Volkov had grown up in the Siberian wilderness, where silence wasn't empty. It was full of opportunities that only patient predators could hear. Staff Sergeant Elena "Ghost" Volkov was about to prove that the most isolated warrior becomes the most lethal hunter. Meet Staff Sergeant Elena Volkov, 26 years old, with ice-blue eyes that could read forest signs invisible to others, and steady hands that had learned patience from wolves and precision from necessity. For 2 years, she had served as a designated marksman for various special operations units, but to most commanders, she was the quiet sniper who seemed too comfortable with solitude to be psychologically stable. Elena's relationship with isolation was unlike anything her military colleagues could understand. While other soldiers craved companionship and constant communication, Elena found strength in silence and clarity in complete solitude. Her comfort with being alone made others uncomfortable, creating doubt about her psychological fitness for team operations. Her background explained her unique relationship with wilderness isolation. Born in a remote Siberian village where the nearest neighbor lived 30 kilometers away, Elena had grown up in an environment where survival depended on reading natural signs and patience that most people couldn't sustain. Her father, Dmitry Volkov, had been a legendary Soviet sniper during the Afghan War before immigrating to America and becoming a wilderness guide in Alaska. He had taught Elena that true hunters didn't just use the forest, they became part of it, thinking like predators while moving like shadows. "Little wolf," he would tell her during their hunting expeditions in the Alaskan wilderness. "Most people fear being alone because they never learn to listen to what silence teaches. But for those who understand, isolation becomes the greatest advantage a hunter can have." Dmitry Volkov had accumulated 83 confirmed kills during his service in Afghanistan, earning his reputation through patience and stealth that exceeded anything taught in conventional sniper schools. But his most important lesson wasn't about shooting. It was about becoming invisible by embracing solitude that others couldn't tolerate. Elena's childhood had been spent learning skills that no military training could provide. She could track animals through forest terrain for days without losing the trail, move through dense woodland without disturbing vegetation, and most importantly, remain motionless for hours while her mind stayed completely focused and alert. During her teenage years, Elena had spent entire weeks alone in the wilderness, living off the land while her father observed from distance to ensure her safety. These expeditions taught her that isolation wasn't punishment, it was liberation from distractions that prevented complete focus on survival and tactical objectives. At 18, Elena had enlisted with wilderness survival skills that impressed even Special Forces instructors. Her marksmanship was exceptional, but her ability to remain alone in hostile environments for extended periods was unprecedented in their experience with conventional military personnel. During sniper school, Elena's performance had been technically perfect while her psychological evaluations raised concerns about her preference for solitary operations. Military doctrine emphasized team coordination and constant communication, but Elena seemed to perform better when left completely alone. "Volkov demonstrates exceptional technical proficiency," one instructor had written, but her comfort with isolation suggests psychological patterns that may not be compatible with modern military operations, requiring team integration and constant communication protocols. Elena had ignored suggestions to undergo additional psychological evaluation or transfer to roles that required less independent operation. She understood that her greatest tactical advantages came from capabilities that others saw as concerning rather than valuable. Her first combat deployment had validated her unique approach while creating institutional confusion about how to employ someone who operated most effectively in complete isolation. Elena's mission success rates were outstanding, but her methods challenged conventional doctrine about sniper employment and psychological support. Colonel Marcus "Iron" Harrison embodied the institutional skepticism that Elena faced throughout her career. At 48 years old, with 24 years of special operations experience, he commanded the regional sniper program with traditional beliefs about psychological requirements for extended solo operations. Harrison respected Elena's technical abilities but questioned whether anyone could maintain psychological stability during completely isolated missions, lasting more than 72 hours. Military research indicated that solitary operations created stress responses that compromised decision-making and tactical effectiveness. "Volkov is technically outstanding," he would tell other officers during briefings, "but extended isolation affects human psychology in ways that create operational risks. Even our best snipers require periodic contact and psychological support during solo missions exceeding 1 week. Harrison's concerns weren't unfounded. Military studies had documented psychological breakdown patterns among personnel conducting extended solo operations. Isolation created anxiety, depression, and paranoid thinking that compromised mission effectiveness and personal safety. But Harrison's institutional knowledge blinded him to the possibility that some individuals might be psychologically adapted for extended solitude in ways that enhanced rather than compromised their operational effectiveness. Elena represented capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about human psychological limitations. The mission that would validate Elena's unique qualifications began with intelligence reports indicating the most significant enemy leadership conference in 3 years. 15 high-value targets, including regional commanders and foreign advisors, would gather for a 2-week strategic planning session in a remote forest compound. The enemy conference location had been chosen specifically to prevent coalition surveillance and intervention. Dense forest provided natural concealment from satellite observation, while distance from civilization created security through isolation that enemy planners believed made attacks impossible. Intelligence indicated the enemy leadership would be protected by over 200 security personnel, using sophisticated countermeasures designed to detect and eliminate any coalition special operations attempts to disrupt their strategic planning conference. The tactical situation presented challenges that exceeded conventional special operations capabilities. The target area was 300 kilometers from the nearest coalition base, accessible only through hostile territory controlled by enemy forces who knew the terrain intimately. Standard special operations doctrine required team insertions with backup support and extraction planning that could respond to changing tactical conditions. But the enemy's security measures would detect any significant coalition presence, making conventional approaches impossible. Elena's mission briefing presented parameters that challenged everything her colleagues understood about human psychological limitations. 2 weeks alone in enemy forest, eliminating high-value targets while avoiding detection by hundreds of searchers who would be actively hunting her. Volkov, this mission requires complete psychological independence, Harrison explained during the classified briefing. No communication for 14 days. No backup support. No extraction until mission completion. Are you certain you can handle that level of isolation? Elena studied the intelligence photos and topographical maps with the methodical approach her father had taught her for analyzing hunting territory. The forest terrain was similar to environments where she had spent months alone, and the enemy's security measures created predictable patterns she could exploit. Sir, Elena replied calmly, isolation isn't a hardship for me. It's a tactical advantage that will allow me to operate in ways that teams couldn't achieve. The other snipers in the briefing room exchanged skeptical glances. Master Sergeant Williams, with 12 years of sniper experience, had never attempted solo operations exceeding 4 days. The psychological pressure of extended isolation had defeated even elite operators during missions lasting more than 1 week. Elena, 2 weeks is a long time to be completely alone while being hunted by hundreds of enemies, Williams said carefully. Even the most experienced snipers need periodic contact to maintain psychological stability. Elena's response reflected years of preparation that her colleagues couldn't understand. Sergeant, I've spent months alone in wilderness that makes this forest look comfortable. The difference is that this time, I'm hunting instead of just surviving. Harrison made the decision that would either validate innovative approaches to solo operations or result in the loss of one of his most capable snipers. Volkov, you have the mission. Insertion in 72 hours. Elena's preparation for the mission began with equipment selection that reflected her unique operational requirements. While other snipers carried communication gear and emergency signaling devices, Elena chose equipment that prioritized stealth and self-sufficiency over contact with friendly forces. Her weapons loadout included a suppressed precision rifle with sufficient ammunition for extended engagement, but more importantly, she selected survival gear that would allow her to live comfortably in forest conditions that would challenge most military personnel. Elena's infiltration into enemy territory occurred during a moonless night that provided natural concealment for movement through terrain that enemy security forces considered impenetrable. Her wilderness skills allowed her to navigate dense forest without using navigation devices that could compromise her position. The insertion went perfectly. Elena established her base camp in terrain that provided concealment while offering multiple observation points overlooking the enemy compound. Her position was chosen using principles her father had taught her about predator behavior and territorial advantage. For the first 3 days, Elena conducted detailed surveillance of enemy security patterns while remaining completely undetected. Her patience and observational skills revealed weaknesses in their defensive measures that conventional reconnaissance would have missed. Enemy security forces were conducting regular patrols through forest areas that they believed provided complete coverage against infiltration attempts. But Elena's movement techniques allowed her to remain invisible while gathering intelligence that conventional surveillance methods couldn't obtain. On day 4, Elena made her first kill. Enemy Regional Commander Petrov emerged from the compound during his morning routine, providing a clear shot at 400 meters. Elena's suppressed rifle eliminated him without alerting security forces to her presence. The psychological impact of losing their regional commander created confusion among enemy leadership, while their security forces began intensive searches for threats they couldn't locate. Elena remained invisible, moving through terrain she understood better than the people who had lived there for years. Elena's second target presented greater challenges. Foreign advisor Martinez was protected by security teams who had increased their vigilance after Petrov's elimination, but Elena's patience allowed her to identify patterns in his protection that created opportunities for precision engagement. On day 6, Martinez made a tactical error that cost him his life. Elena's shot came from a position that enemy security forces hadn't considered possible, eliminating another high-value target while maintaining complete operational security. By day 8, Elena had eliminated 5 enemy commanders while enemy security forces were conducting desperate searches for threats they couldn't find. Their patrols were increasing in frequency but decreasing in effectiveness, as fear and confusion compromised their tactical discipline. Elena's psychological state remained completely stable despite isolation that would have broken most military personnel. Her comfort with solitude allowed her to maintain perfect focus, while enemy forces suffered psychological pressure from knowing they were being hunted by someone they couldn't locate. Her 7th through 10th kills occurred during the second week, as enemy leadership became increasingly desperate to identify and eliminate the invisible threat that was systematically destroying their command structure. Elena's tactics evolved with each engagement, using enemy responses to create new opportunities. On day 12, Elena eliminated the enemy's top intelligence officer during a security briefing, where leadership was discussing countermeasures against the ghost sniper who was terrorizing their conference. The psychological warfare was as devastating as the kinetic effects. Elena's final engagements came during day 14, as surviving enemy leadership attempted to evacuate the compound. Her last 3 shots eliminated commanders who believed they were escaping to safety, completing mission objectives that conventional wisdom said were impossible. When Elena emerged from the forest after 14 days of complete isolation, she found Harrison waiting at the extraction point, with an expression that mixed professional amazement with personal revelation about human psychological capabilities. "Volkov, mission report," Harrison said, studying Elena's appearance for signs of psychological stress that he expected to see after 2 weeks of complete isolation under combat conditions. Elena looked exactly as she had before, insertion calm, focused, and completely comfortable with the solitude that would have driven most people to psychological breakdown. "Sir, 13 high-valued targets eliminated. Enemy leadership conference terminated. No compromise of operational security." Harrison stared at Elena for a long moment, understanding that she had accomplished something that challenged fundamental assumptions about human psychological limitations and operational requirements for extended solo missions. "Elena, how did you handle 2 weeks of complete isolation while being actively hunted by hundreds of enemy personnel?" Elena's response reflected a relationship with solitude that her colleagues couldn't comprehend. "Sir, I wasn't isolated. I was in my element. The forest provided everything I needed while enemy forces provided targets that validated why I prefer working alone." The after-action reports from Elena's mission became classified case studies examined by special operations commands worldwide. Her psychological stability and tactical effectiveness during extended isolation challenged doctrinal assumptions about human limitations and solo operation parameters. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Elena Volkov was promoted to Sergeant First Class and offered assignment to units that specialized in extended solo operations behind enemy lines. But more importantly, she never again heard anyone question whether she could handle psychological isolation. Harrison became her strongest advocate, frequently telling other commanders, Volkov taught us that some warriors are built for solitude in ways that make them more effective, not less. Her comfort with isolation wasn't a psychological weakness, it was her greatest tactical strength. Today, Master Sergeant Elena Ghost Volkov runs specialized training programs for solo operations, teaching techniques that combine wilderness survival with psychological preparation for extended isolation. Her students learn not just how to operate alone, but how to embrace solitude as a tactical advantage. Elena's philosophy, validated through impossible success under impossible conditions, has become the foundation of modern solo operation doctrine. Isolation isn't punishment for warriors who understand how to use silence as a weapon and solitude as camouflage. Her program emphasizes psychological preparation, wilderness survival, and tactical approaches to solo operations that challenge traditional assumptions about human social requirements during extended military missions. Have you ever been told you were too isolated or too comfortable with being alone, only to discover that your solitude was actually your greatest strength? Elena's story reminds us that the qualities others see as psychological weaknesses might be exactly what impossible situations require. The snipers who worried about her psychological stability learned that some warriors are built for solitude in ways that make them more dangerous, not more vulnerable. When everyone else needs constant contact and support, the person who thrives in isolation becomes the perfect weapon for missions that others can't handle. If you believe that embracing your nature, even when others don't understand it, can become your greatest tactical advantage, share this story. Because somewhere, someone is being told their comfort with solitude is unhealthy, not knowing that isolation might be exactly what makes them unstoppable. Elena Volkov didn't just survive 2 weeks alone in enemy forest. She proved that the most isolated warriors often become the most effective predators when they stop apologizing for who they are and start using their nature as a weapon. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this.
I just want to take a moment to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you. Folded hands, your love, support, likes, comments, and subscriptions mean the world to me. Without you, this journey wouldn't be possible. Every view, every share, and every encouraging word keeps me motivated to create more content for you all. I'm truly grateful to have such an amazing community by my side. Let's keep growing together and making this journey even more special. Red Heart.